I'm really realizing there's so many layers to this, and it's
there's a lot of layers,
years and years and years and years and years of the same thing. And yet conversation, it's amazing what can happen through conversation and understanding and just learning. And I know there's been a lot of talk I've heard about kind of opportunities for Black minority ethnics as well. What you're saying about the roles within kind of acting that you were getting. I don't actually know for sure, but what I have been hearing lately is about opportunities, and that if the same opportunities obviously aren't given to everybody, then you grow up in a different place, you go to school in a different place with different opportunities for work, and how that might affect the way you then end up leading your life. And obviously expectation as well. If there's a certain expectation that someone will be involved in crime, it's that judgment that then intrinsically affects the way that you feel, which can then change the way that you live. So there's so many layers that I'm understanding are behind everything that's rising to the surface.
Yeah,
there is.
Subliminal
There's
stuff.
a lot of layers.
And the funny thing is about it, it's not just affecting. We're not saying that all of this is there and it's just affecting white people. It also affects the young Black people as well, because it's all the subliminals go, but it goes both ways.
So the subliminals with being in a gang, it affects young Black people as they subconsciously feel the need to be involved. Some of them will feel the need to be involved.
That's all
gangs.
I'm good for, is to be in a gang.
But then the way it affects white people is they think a lot of Black people are drug dealers and scary and dangerous.
Yeah, we
So
don't.
it affects everyone in a negative way.
Yeah, we don't have enough positive Black role models shown in TV and film. And
then even in school, what young Black people, what we learn about our history and who we are is you're slaves. They say we're going to do Black history, and then all they tell you is, you was a slave.
Yeah, they don't tell you anything about Black kings and queens, Black inventors, Black scientists, and Black mathematicians. We don't hear any of that. We just hear, we used to be slaves, and that's our history.
Because when I was in school, I thought that's what our history was. It was, we were slaves until my parents and my family educated me about there's more to our history than you were slave, because obviously we was around a lot longer than just 500 years ago. But that's all you hear about, because slavery interrupted our history. It's not our history.
I love that. That's a really, really interesting point, actually, because my understanding as a youngster of Black history is slavery. Thankfully, I was brought up to be open-minded enough to know that isn't it. That doesn't mean that you're slaves and that's where you've come from. But it is interesting how that has the subliminal impact, as you say.
But I think it does date back to slavery, because when slavery was happening and they was taking kids and people away from their families and taking them to different places, they did it. It was a strategic plan, because if you don't know where you came from, you're likely to believe whatever you're being told, and you're just going to do what you've been told. So it was part of the plan to not let Black people know where they came from.
Yeah, that history, you don't know your history. And we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we?
Yeah.
Just like when people say, but where are you really from? And it's like, well, actually, I don't know, because I know that I was born in the UK. I know that my mum's side are from Trinidad. I know my dad's side are from Barbados. But
that's just part of the journey.
Where were they before that? Where in Africa were we from? No idea. Because they were taken from Africa and placed in the Caribbean. But it's like, well, where were we before that? It's like it's like almost like you don't know where. And it's like when we look at our surnames, we've got like Ferguson's our surname.
We were just talking about
that's a Scottish surname, because it was a slave owner that would have named whoever it was Ferguson. Was our name before that.
Because we was just having this conversation yesterday, and I was saying I don't feel comfortable having the surname Ferguson anymore, because that means our slave owners would have been Ferguson, and then you get the name Ferguson. But then at the same time, you feel like you don't want to change your last name because then your family might be upset because that's your family name. But it's
and that's why Malcolm X is Malcolm X.
Yeah, because you realise
that's not his.
Yeah,
the weight that must carry, that even now, things that happened years and years and years ago. I mean, you know, we hear it with big events like the Holocaust, the impact that has now, but we neglect to think sometimes that, you know, what effect has that had on you guys, you know, on people living now, that I think it would be really naive to forget that and to think that, you know, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it was however many years ago. Well, you know, even names, I wouldn't have even thought of that, but it's a very interesting point that even your name now suggests the history of discrimination.
Yeah, we
and
literally just talking about this. Yeah,
it puts you in a place of, well, do you want to have that surname? Do you just make a surname up? Do you just pick a casual African name that you know of and just change your name? But it's like, well, how do you trace that back? You don't know. And I think it's little things like that that the world needs to talk about. I mean, obviously you can't physically change, you can't change history, but just to be aware of reality and being aware of history, it makes a difference just for people to understand that is why. Because you get people say, oh, well, why the looting? Now, I don't condone the violence, and actually it's mostly not the Black people that are doing the violence. They're the ones being very kind of peaceful. But I don't condone that, but I can say I can understand it, because at some point you bubble over. It's almost like a very happy dog, for example, and you hear about a dog that suddenly bit the child's face. It's like, no, they didn't suddenly bite the child's face. The child would have been poking and poking and poking at it before it flipped out and done it. And it's like, well, that's what happens if you keep
also
poking.
It's learned behavior, you know. I think that's the other factor as well, that there is always a reason why somebody will act the way they do, and it's the way you're brought up, and as well as those other influences and how you react to those things. I think that's really important thing that you've just mentioned.
And I think young people are they don't know what to think. The younger generation, you know, in the teenagers or the early 20s, they don't know what to think. They're angry. And when you're young, you do things that you shouldn't do. Anyone does. But when you've got that much anger, it explodes. And we have to take care of our young people, because they need guidance right now. They need to be able to make sense of what's going on in the world. I think that's what we forget.
But I do have to say, a lot of the rioting that they talk about, first of all, there's not that much rioting happening. And second of all, the rioting is happening from outside groups that are taking advantage of the situation just so they can steal. And in America, there's actually been undercover police officers that have been setting police cars on fire and starting riots just so they can discredit the Black Lives Matter movement. So they can say, oh, these are aggressive, angry people. But it was actually, I've seen a lot of videos where, like, this Black lady and other Black people were filming people that were vandalizing, and they was begging for them to stop vandalizing, because they were saying that if you guys vandalize, they're going to blame us. So, and then they were saying, but we're doing it for you. Then they were saying, we don't want you to do it for us. We just want a peaceful protest because we're going to get the blame for this.
I think this is where because it's such a big thing and it's such a historical thing that's happening at the moment. It's got years and years worth of history behind it. I do think there's a collective kind of, what do we do? You know, it's such a big thing. What is actually useful to do? And I think it's really important to reinforce, and that's kind of what I'm getting from you guys as well, that the best thing really is to communicate and to talk and to understand and to find out about the history and kind of channel it into the positive side of things, rather than turning to, you know, like the violence and the looting and all those things. Because if you really want to make a difference, I think the way to do it is by understanding and it to discredit something as well, it kind of becomes a bit of a sticky situation then, because it's not giving the credit to what is actually going on, which is the conversation and the understanding, and all those people. It's been really amazing seeing the response around the world actually to something that happens in one place, but it's such a universal thing. It's been amazing.
Yeah,
it has.
I think this is the biggest time where people have actually come together. I think we've had a lot of anger and hate back, but at the same time we've had a lot of love back.
Yeah.
And literally the two extremes.
Yeah.
And you have to be grateful for the support. We do.
We are definitely.
We are so grateful, because this is what we need. We need everyone to come together, and that's what gets me frustrated when people say, "Oh, but all lives matter." It's like, we're not saying only Black Lives Matter. We're saying it because that's who we're rallying around now. But all lives need to come together to rally around the group that are being targeted.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's been really frustrating is people being supportive but have said, "Oh, but I don't see colour." It's like, it's great, but if you do not see colour, then therefore you can't see racism, and then that's a problem.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to admit that we are different colours. We have to see colour, but that's the only way to spot out injustice.
Everyone does see colour. That's not true.
Yeah, it's just alive, isn't it? You don't see it because are you blind? Unless you're colourblind, you have to see the colour. So seeing colour is to ignore racism. And I think we need to come away from all, I don't see colour, therefore I'm not racist. Like, well, no, if you're not seeing colour, then you can't spot racism.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to see colour and admit that we do have different colours in order for you to see the injustices that are happening. We can't put our heads in the sand and pretend that we're all the same colour, because we're not. And we're not the same. So we have to see colour to make a change. It's not anything bad, but we do see it, and you have to see it. Otherwise, how do you make a change to the wrongs that are happening?
It's so like obvious when you say it, but it's amazing that it takes like the conversation about it to really realize that it does seem kind of a denial of kind of what's going on, almost like a brushing under the carpet of what's actually happening. But we have to, with there's so many issues we all need to be kind of open about and more honest about, and this is a really big one at the moment. Is there anything else that you've seen that has been really helpful in, like what else can we do practically, do you feel, at the moment to help kind of ourselves understand what's going on, or our kids to understand? It must be quite difficult for younger people actually to see what's going on and understand the depth of what it is.
There's a few different things that can be done. Not just watching mainstream media, because mainstream media is very biased with what they portray. Looking into different media streams and like other influential people, Black people, and people that have different viewpoints, and listening to what they say. If you do have any Black, Caribbean, African people, like listening to them, talking to them, asking them questions, like genuine questions, because no one's going to be annoyed if you ask them questions most of the time. People just get annoyed when people are not asking genuine questions,
they don't
just
want
trying
listen.
to rebuttal.
Yeah. And I think another really important thing, that if you're a white person that has Black friends, ask them if they're okay. It's something so simple, because we're dealing with this, and it is heavy and it is stressful. But all of my white friends, one has messaged me and said, "This must be really hard for you. Are you okay? Do you need me to do anything?" And that meant the world to me, just to know that not just they were behind everyone in general, but behind me. And it made just like, "Are you okay? What can I do?" So ask your friends if they're okay. What can you do? Because then it shows real support. It's the same way as if anything bad happened to one of your friends, you would ask. You'd be like, "Oh, if you've lost a family member, or they lost a job, or anything bad, or the car crash," you'd ask them if they're okay. And I think we need to do this in the same way. We're not physically damaged, but this is a lot of mental hurt that comes to the forefront. So just ask if they're okay.
Yeah, it's very draining, because there is a lot of Black people that we know that have had to have breaks from social media because it's just getting so tiring seeing everything that's happening and things people are saying.
And it hurts to see who people you thought were friends. It's hard to see them silent. That's painful to know that your friend saying nothing, and you're like, hold on. How can you not say anything?
Yeah, this is where I think it's quite a difficult scenario, because I know I've been quiet about it for a while, not really knowing. Well, first of all, feeling that it's not really something I can contribute, to. Obviously, I can in this way, which is something that I felt to be the right thing to do. But I do know I felt for a while I didn't want to comment on it, because I didn't feel it was my place to do that. But I did feel it was important for me to know what was going on, and to try and educate myself, basically, about how people are feeling, what impact this might have had. I think it's I think it's a typically British thing as well, that
it definitely is.
Like, we don't want to say the wrong thing, and I think what this has shown, I'm kind of making my way through this with you and trying to understand and ask questions that I feel are useful. But I think removing kind of fear of, am I saying the right thing, and just asking questions, and not being afraid to do that. And I think giving your opinion is different to asking how someone is, and I think it's really important where we sit on those things, that we're not putting our own ideas and opinions on you guys, but that we're asking questions, and that we're wanting to understand and be there in the same way, like you say, when if we go through a bereavement, everyone wants to be there for you, and this is, in a way, it strikes me as kind of, it kind of is a bereavement of the way things have been, and it's kind of a nod back to all the history that has come, and it's kind of all coming to the surface, and that has got to be difficult, because just the weight of that on its own. So it's interesting, because asking you questions has made me feel more understanding of just kind of how the impact of this alone is affecting, the Black minority ethnic groups.
You said like, what can people do to like support, or what can help that people can do. One thing that people can do is like just showing that they understand what's going on, and like even just posting and saying they're supporting the movement, or they don't agree with what the police officer did, like just shows that you understand what's going on. Because I think, like, when people have friends and they see them not posting or not doing anything, they kind of start to wonder, so are you one of those people that agree with what the police officer did?
You don't know, do you? And I think even worse than that, it's not even the people that are silent, it's the people that are silent through what happened, but then they've got something to say, oh, those poor horses in the riot. It's like, hold on, so you're worried about the horses, you've gone out of your way to write a whole post about the poor horses, but you said nothing about George Floyd and anything else. It's like, I'm not saying don't worry about the horse, but if you just post about the horse, it shows you don't care about the other thing. So,
or if you say, why are people breaking lockdown rules and protesting and spreading coronavirus?
That's not the way to deal with it, I've heard. It's like,
but you said nothing about why
issue
people
in the first
are protesting.
Like, you're picking and choosing what you feel to talk about, and by not talking about the thing that started the whole thing, that hurts.
And also, I think the other thing is as well, because like people are hot on social media nowadays, like anything that we're not happy with, we talk about. Like when the gorilla got shot, everyone was outraged and said the poor gorilla. What's his name again? But everyone Yeah, everyone was outraged and said like
the
it's
world
disgusting.
was outraged.
Like when trees are being burnt down, like everyone comes together and said it's disgusting. But then it's like you see the same people that was talking about all these different issues and things happening to animals, when their fellow human being is being killed, like nothing said.
You said nothing. And forgetting what's happened in the past, because I'm hearing a lot of what, no, we didn't come together for Lee Rigby like this. And it's like, it's the most frustrating thing, because firstly, they're two completely different scenarios. I had someone say, but why aren't we saying white lives matter for Lee Rigby? I said, well, what happened was really bad, but the men that, it was an isolated incident. The men were immediately arrested, they were imprisoned, they were dealt with. And there was a massive outcry. The whole country was shocked and outraged. Everyone was behind, and rightly so, because he deserved better. He was, he fought for our country. He deserved better than that. But even Lee Rigby's family have come on record to say, can you stop using Lee Rigby's name to discredit the Black Lives Matter movement? Can you? And if they can understand it, why can't everybody else? It's like, why do you have to compare? This is not a comparison. It's not trying to get one up on anyone. It's just looking at what's happening right now and seeing it at face value without any comparisons to anybody else. We don't need to compare.
I think that's really important. It's recognizing what's happening right now and what is happening right now, and not using something else against it and saying, but was this more important or was that more important? Anything that comes up like this, I think, is really important, because it's coming up for a reason. And I think we just need to be less kind of afraid to be vulnerable, and particularly for people like me, white people, who might be sat at home thinking, well, what the hell do I do? Like, I want to support, but I don't know how to. I think as a community, we need to just come together and be less afraid. And it does feel vulnerable having these conversations, because I haven't faced the same discriminations, the injustices that you guys have.
I think that's a key thing that you just said, that you haven't faced the same injustices. I think the conversation really that needs to be had is understanding white privilege, because I've got a friend who's very smart, very intelligent. Oh my gosh, she knows everything, but thought white privilege meant that you are a king or a queen. Kind of thing. It's like, the comment of, well, I grew up in a council estate, I don't have any privilege. It's like, it's not how much money you have in the bank, it's not whether you've got a crown on your head. That's not what white privilege means. It's the fact that you were born into a society that automatically favors you because of your skin color. That's what it means. It's not the money you have in the bank. Even if you live on a council estate, if a white person goes for the job interview and the black person goes for a job interview, there's a high chance the white person's going to get the job over the black person in a lot of communities. Not everywhere, no, but in many communities, that's what happens. We spoke about this the other day. It's the fact that a white person can just book a holiday and it's cool. A black person has to research how racist the country is before we go there, just in case. How racist is the country before you book a holiday? It's when you ring up on the phone, we put on a phone voice so we don't sound intimidating or too black.
Which is a British white voice.
Yeah, we try and sound more British and posh on the phone, so just in case the person on the other end, so automatically goes, oh, they're a black person, and judges us.
But it's not just because of that. It's so you actually get to the interview.
Yeah, so you get
you get to the face-to-face interview, because sometimes if you had your normal voice, you wouldn't even make it to the interview.
To that point, it's what name do I put on a CV? So Josh's brother's birth name is Kadeem, and he put some CVs out with Kadeem on it. Didn't get any calls back. We all call him Dean for short as a nickname. So he changed his CV to say Dean, and the next day he got callbacks.
Wow,
just from the name. That's what we mean by white privilege. It's not that you guys are all rich and we're not rich, because I know rich black people. It's not about the money that you have.
We know black people that are in the council, and they still
suffer from racism. My mum, who was the first black mayor of Stevenage, black female mayor, shall I say, of Stevenage, she went away. It was when we were talking at the first kind of talks about Brexit and all of that, like years and years ago, talking about leaving the EU and immigrants and conversations about Syria and things like that, when that came up. And she went to Germany, and she just says she's never felt more Black then than she'd ever felt before in her life around my friends, because no one was speaking up. And she was very high up in the council and very high up in her career, and she still felt like that. So it's like, it's just understand. I think that's what we really need to do, is have a conversation about what white privilege is. No, you didn't create the system, but it's understanding that you've got a platform that we might not necessarily ever have. And use it to benefit, rather than to just watch it from afar and go, oh, look at that, and then not say anything.
Some people in America. I know, go on. You go.
I was just going to say, I think it's we're so much at the start of this change, really, and I think it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort daily by everybody to change the way that we have seen things, and to change the subliminal thoughts and feelings we have based on upbringing and media and, you know, all the things that influence us, and just being open and vulnerable and honest and being willing to listen. I think it's amazing the power.
It's like the blue pill and the red pill. It's like, you've got to be willing to have your mind open, because it's hard. Even for us, we're learning new things. Like, just recently we learned that up until 2015, the UK taxpayer was paying off slave owners compensation because they freed the slaves. So up until 2015, we've been paying those slave owners. So it's like, not only that, but the worst part is so as a Black human being, I was paying for my own freedom by paying tax, and I didn't even know. It's like, how mad is that? That we were paying for our own freedom up until 2015, and people say, oh, slavery was years ago. No, we were paying for it up until a few years ago.
I mean, it wasn't really that long ago when you look at the history of
it really wasn't.
So no wonder. I mean, it's got to come up, because it's I think it's also it's the grieving of something that happened, you know, that it happened to people just like us. Obviously I mean that from the human perspective rather than a perspective. But it happened to, you know, it happened to humans, and to think of what it would feel like to be in that position, and to know, you know, I mean, for me to know that, you know, down the line, there were white people who did that, who had anybody as a slave is quite hard to get your head around, to be honest. But to think that there was a separation because of your colour, because of where you're from, not even because of where you're from, because you're British, but you know, it's quite a lot to get your head around.
So I think everyone's doing a lot of learning right now, because I know that we've learned more about our history now. And knowing about like all the statues, I'd not even thought, like, I'm not the type of person that enjoys looking at history and going, oh, I wonder what that statue is, but knowing that those statues were there, I'm like,
yeah, that was insane. I didn't know they had statues of slave owners.
So it literally makes no sense. So we're learning just how deep the rabbit hole goes at the same time everyone else is. So it is a kind of scary thought to think they've got statues in the UK of slave owners, and we're paying off slave owners, and it's like, well, why? How is this allowed to happen? It makes me think, well, I want my taxes back, thank you. Why am I paying for that? I was like, what? Give me back all my taxes if that's what they're going towards. I don't want to pay that.
To be honest, I don't even know why they're even paying slave owners, to be honest.
It was the conversation at the time. It was because they lost their slaves, they had to be compensated, and that was the deal, that they then paid them back because they lost their slaves. And that was the deal they had in order to free the slaves. And, you know, if that was the deal, that was the deal. But A, why don't we know about it? And B, why weren't Black people exempt from paying that? Because then the whole moral, ethically, it's like, how is it that you've asked Black people to pay back for their own freedom?
These are the really important questions we need to ask. and to kind of get our heads around. I think something you said earlier about the you said something about you're not physically injured, but mentally there's a lot going on and a lot to understand. I think collectively as a human race now, we need to help each other to kind of reconcile that and understand, and kind of understand how we can move forward with that and help each other to move forward with that, and change the way, you know, prejudice is, and change the different ways that people might be treated in different scenarios.
Yeah, there's something important that you said earlier. You said this is going to take time, like it's not just going to happen straight away. And that really is an important point, is the fact that hopefully this just isn't a fad, it isn't a phase, because it is going to take a long time for the change to happen. And everyone's going to have to continue doing what they're doing.
Yeah, everyone's going to play. And I think one of the ways to do that is we have to address the institution. I think it's not just you and I, it's the people that make the decisions, it's the people that instigate all this. Like when we think of the Windrush scandal, it makes me physically sick that, you know, Britain went over to the Caribbean and Africa and said, hey, we need workers here because we've lost a lot of our troops in the war, so we need people to run our country, brought them all over, to then how many years later say, oh, by the way, you need to leave now. It's a massive kick in the face to all of those people. And I spoke to my dad about it because he came over in Windrush. And I was like, so how come you're not worried about this? And he said,
well, he's in Barbados. So.
No, I know, but then he could potentially bring that back. But I asked him, why is he not worried about it? And he explained that at the time, there was a certain paperwork that needed to be filled out. And my dad, being the way he is, he's one of those people that meticulous. He looks through the fine print. And he knew about this extra paperwork and went and got it signed, so he's safe. But they didn't advertise that you needed to do this. It was kind of like, you need to read the small print and figure it out. So a lot of people at the time, obviously they came over trusting, so they didn't look at that extra paperwork. And instead of the government saying, well, actually, yeah, I know that you didn't know about this paperwork, but we'll allow it.
Yeah.
They've
just that they didn't look at it. It wasn't there. It wasn't like it was all together, was it?
No, it was hard to find. It was one of those things, it was hard to locate. So instead of the government now saying, yeah, actually, you didn't sign it, but we'll allow it because of all the work that you've done, they're not doing that. They probably didn't sign it, so get out. It's like, it's such a kick in the face to all those people that came over to build Britain back again.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is, as a white British person, obviously I've heard of Windrush.
Yeah.
This is perfect example. I've heard of it. Could I tell you what it was? No.
Yeah.
No idea, because it wasn't, partly because it isn't something that has affected me within my history.
Yeah.
And also because, you know, it's not something really that I think has been talked about enough. And it just goes to show that there is so much we all need to learn about our history as human beings.
Because when you think about it, when they talk about Black history at school and history, that would be an important part of British history that they should talk about, is the fact that so many Caribbean people came over here and helped to build the country.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
I feel that's quite a celebratory thing that happened, that someone from another nation came to help build Britain.
Yeah.
And I think that's a positive part of Black history, but also British history.
Yeah.
That can be celebrated on both sides of the coin, because it was a time when we all were one. I mean, they came over and they were met with no dogs, no Irish and no Blacks was on all the doors. And they were met with that, but at the same time, there was also a lot of acceptance, because a lot of people understood they were coming to help build Britain. So it wasn't all, you know, fun and games, but for the most part, they were here, and everyone, it was about support, and it was about community, and it was about, let's do this together kind of thing. And that should be celebrated on both sides of the thing.
Yeah.
And we should be proud of that time in history, the first time when people came together.
Yeah, exactly.
In Britain, which I think is a good thing.
I think there's this just goes to show there's a lot more conversations needed. I know that I myself have a lot have a lot to learn and understand, and get to grips with about history and even just everything that's going on now. But I'm really grateful for people like you who are open to having these conversations and talking about, you know, what it all means, because it's sometimes it can seem a little bit daunting because it's such a big area that has so much history behind it. You don't know where to tread or what the right thing to do is. But I think we, you know, we're all a community as a world. You know, what happens in America affects us here, and what happened 500,000, 2,000 years ago affects us now. And I think we need to recognise that and understand that a bit better, I think.
Yeah, because I've heard that, oh, it happened so long ago, and oh, it's in America. I'm like, but we're all one race. We're the human race.
And the thing is,
it doesn't matter if it's America or here.
And if anything America does, the UK is not far behind.
No, exactly. Kind of follow everything that they do anyway. But I think it is important to understand that, you know, when people say all lives matter, all lives will matter, and they should matter. When Black lives are equal, then it really will be all lives matter, and that is the goal. So all lives can matter, but right now they don't. And I think we need to become aware of that. And it's not just a black and white thing, it's even in other countries. It's caring about all the children that killed in Syria. It's like people don't realize, oh, Syria, no one really cares about that. But if you go and look at what's going on there and what's happened, it's shocking.
Yeah.
And that's happening right now.
Mm.
We need to take care of what's happening in the rest of the world and take care of other people. And I said that to someone who was worried about the fact that their child is vulnerable, and they're worried that if we're all protesting and getting back together, then COVID-19 is going to come back and her child's vulnerable. And I said, you know, I understand that you're protective over your child, but why aren't you also protected over George Floyd? You said nothing about that, but now you're worried about your child. And I think is the key thing. We're worried about ourselves and our own. It's like, that's the problem with humanity. We need to worry about everybody collectively, not just, you know, you don't speak up just because it affects you. Speak up because it's affecting the world.
Because to be honest, for me, like anytime I see injustice, I'm going to speak up, no matter who it is. I don't like injustice, like, period.
Regardless of colour or age or gender or whatever.
If any person is having injustice, I don't like it. Like, when I was at school, like, if someone was like being left out or picked on, I wouldn't stand for it. I wouldn't like it.
And I think that's important. And like in the scenario with George Floyd, that people cared enough to publicise what happened. That's what's brought all of this to the surface. And if that one person hadn't cared about that scenario and had just walked on by, despite the fact that it's a police officer, and I understand you might not be able to get physically involved, because how do you understand how to deal with that situation? But to care about it enough to share it and help other people to see what's going on and understand, that's crucial. And that's the reason we're here talking about this and why the conversation's being had around the world.
Yeah, that's what, and you hit the nail on the head. It's the conversations that need to be had, just the open, honest conversations that need to be had. And one point that I do want to say, because I've seen a lot of white people like apologizing and saying, I'm sorry, I feel really guilty. It's like, it's not for you to feel guilty about now, because you didn't physically do it, so you don't need to say I'm sorry. You know, don't sit there and be weighed down, because I think that's what holds people back from being open, is because they don't want to feel the guilt. But you know, I always say, don't feel that guilt for yourself because you didn't do it. Instead, you can be the one that makes a change. You don't have to sit there and feel bad about it. Just open your mouth. That's all it is. Just be the change. And I think that's the key thing. We're not
even if you do feel a certain way, but
open your mouth. And I think that's the big thing. Is no, we're not here to blame. We're here to open your mind so you know what's happening, and then we can all do something about it. Work together as one family to do something about it.
Well, I'm really grateful to both of you for being willing to be a part of that conversation, because I think to be vulnerable in that way, I think it's just really important at the moment that we're all vulnerable in this way, and we put ourselves out there to understand and just listen to each other and have, as you say, have conversations and just learn, and particularly help our children to understand what's going on, and to start to rewrite that history a little bit, to stop those things from happening, the kind of prejudice that, not prejudice, what's the word, the subliminal the kind of subliminal reactions that we have, to try and rewrite those a little bit.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
I don't expect it to happen in our lifetime, because it's already in your head. How do you brainwash yourself? My battery's low. Can I cover my charger?
Oh, no.
It's in that time. We've been talking so long. It was fully charged, but my battery's really weird.
It's the kind of subject we could talk for hours and hours, because it's such a heavy weighted issue. But even I feel myself, I have a better understanding and more ability to be, I keep using the word vulnerable, but it is a vulnerable thing to have these conversations where you might not feel comfortable or be in control or know what to do. But I'm really glad that we could do this and we could have those conversations. So hopefully that will help other people to be able to feel like they can support in whatever way they can, or just try to educate themselves and understand a bit more.
Yeah.